Yield management. The same pricing model airlines use to make sure no seat flies empty and no dollar goes uncollected, applied to the most visited theme park on Earth. But within 3 years, attendance dropped, every free perk was stripped, and the parks division posted $10 billion in operating income. How did one sentence at one conference change everything? To understand what that sentence cost, start with what Disney World used to include in the price. In 1971, Walt Disney's Vision opened in Central Florida. He had died 5 years earlier, but the design philosophy survived him. The parks were built around a single idea. Once a family paid admission, frictionless service took over. Everything inside the gates was designed to feel effortless. A family landing at Orlando International in 2015 saw that idea still breathing. A Disney shuttle was waiting at the curb and a driver in uniform loaded the bags. The next time that family thought about transportation was the ride home. 3 weeks before the trip, a box arrived at the front door. Inside was a rubber wristband called Magic Band, already linked to the room key, the park tickets, and the dining reservations. The kids wore it around the house like a countdown clock. Once inside the parks, a system called Fast Pass let a family of 4 walk onto Space Mountain with a 5-minute wait, while the standby line stretched 90 minutes into the Florida sun. On select nights, scanning a resort room key at the gate kept the parks open until midnight. Effortless for the family, expensive for Disney. The shuttle fleet cost Disney money. The wristband manufacturing line cost Disney money. The reservation technology cost Disney money. But every free benefit kept a family inside the Disney bubble for 5 straight days. Eating Disney food, buying Disney merchandise, sleeping in Disney beds. The average guest in the mid-2010s spent more than $300 a day inside that loop. The ecosystem paid for itself. Then the perks became the product. Disney closed its parks in March of 2020. When they reopened months later, every guest needed a reservation to enter. That was the safety measure. Chapek turned it into the pricing tool. The reservation system gave Disney something it had never had before: control over exactly how many people entered each park on each day. Volume became a variable, not a given, and once volume was controlled, spending per guest became the metric that mattered. Magical Express ended for new arrivals in January of 2022 after 17 years. A family landing at Orlando International for the first time since the pandemic walked off the jet bridge and found an empty curb where the shuttle used to wait. FastPass was killed in October of 2021. Its replacement, Genie Plus, launched at $15 per guest per day. The system that used to be free now cost a family of $4 $60 before they rode a single ride. Standby wait times at popular attractions began stretching past 90 minutes on days the parks were not even at full capacity. Extended evening park hours were restricted to guests staying at deluxe tier resorts, the most expensive rooms on property. Magic Bands were no longer complimentary. Every perk that had kept families inside the bubble was stripped out and rebuilt as a revenue line. Bob Iger returned as chief executive on November 20th, 2022. The expectation among fans and analysts was a rollback. Chapek had been unpopular. Iger was the architect of the modern Disney brand, the executive who had built the parks into a global franchise. But Iger kept every revenue mechanism Chapek had built. He did not reverse a single cut, he added to them. The Lightning Lane Premier Pass launched under Iger's watch at prices reaching $449 per person for a single day at the Magic Kingdom during peak periods. The architect of the brand kept the machine running. Each cut across the Disney World resort followed the same logic. Strip a free service from the guest experience. Sell the replacement back at a premium. The shuttle disappears and a paid minivan service fills the space. FastPass disappears and Genie Plus fills the space. Evening hours disappear for most guests, and deluxe room rates hold their premium because the access is now exclusive. The mechanism is not complicated. Disney created friction where none existed, then sold the fix. But 3 separate sources outside the company confirm the pattern was not accidental. In August of 2020, during a quarterly earnings call, Chapek explained that a guest who travels to the resort and stays for 5 to 7 days is, in his words, marginally more valuable to the business than someone who comes in on an annual pass and stays a day or two. The most frequent visitors, the families who came every other weekend, were being described by the sitting chief executive as less financially valuable than a tourist who flies in once and never returns. That statement reframed loyalty as a cost problem. That was 2020. What came next was more direct. In November of 2025, CFO Hugh Johnston sat down at the Wells Fargo TMT Summit and said the company's consumer tends to be at the higher income deciles. He added that those consumers continue to do well. That is a demographic targeting statement delivered at an investor conference to an audience of institutional money managers. The middle-class families who had built the brand over 50 years were not the consumer being discussed in that room. And there was a financial reason Disney could afford to say it out loud. Disney Plus and Hulu generated $582 million in operating income during the second quarter of fiscal 2026, an 88% increase from the prior year. The streaming division was finally contributing profit instead of bleeding cash. The parks no longer needed volume to cover streaming losses. Disney had financial room to keep the gates selective. Meanwhile, Universal opened Epic Universe 20 miles down the road in May of 2025. In the first full quarter after opening, Comcast reported an 18% increase in revenue across its theme park division. The families Disney priced out did not stop going to theme parks. They went somewhere else. In fiscal 2019, a family of 4 visiting Disney World for 5 days at a moderate resort could expect to spend between $3,500 and $4,500. In 2025, travel industry analysts put the same trip above $7,000. Inflation accounts for part of the increase. The rest comes from services that used to be free and now carry a price tag. That is what $10 billion in operating income looks like from the kitchen table. If this channel covers the kind of corporate strategy that most business news ignores, the subscribe button is right below. Per capita guest spending at domestic parks rose 5% in fiscal 2025. Experiences segment revenue grew 7% in the second quarter of fiscal 2026, reaching a record $9.5 billion for the quarter alone. Domestic attendance fell 1% across the same reporting period. Fewer guests walked through the turnstiles. Each one who did spent more money. Disney made more money with fewer customers inside the park. That gap between falling attendance and rising revenue has a price tag. In fiscal 2019, the last full year before the pandemic, the parks division generated roughly $6.8 billion in operating income with record attendance. 6 years later, attendance was down and operating income was $10 billion. Over $3 billion in additional profit came from guests who were spending more, not from more guests. A cocktail at a Disney World lounge costs roughly $2 to make. The menu price is $18. The guest occupies a bar stool for 45 minutes. That's an 80% profit margin. One bartender. A major attraction costs hundreds of millions of dollars to design, engineer, and build. It requires dozens of employees to operate every hour of every operating day, and it generates zero direct revenue per rider. There is no ticket scanner at the entrance to Space Mountain. From a pure yield per square foot perspective, a themed lounge is a better financial asset than a world-class roller coaster. Walk through the parks today, and the math is written into the architecture. Epcot opened a lounge inside Spaceship Earth in 2025. Space 220 turned the Mission Space Pavilion into a high-end restaurant and bar. Hollywood Studios closed its studio backlot tour and built Toy Story Land and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge in its place. Both lands feature rides, but both are designed around premium retail. Galaxy's Edge alone includes a $250 lightsaber workshop and a $100 droid building experience. Every new venue, every retail corridor, every replaced attraction tells the same financial story. But there is one detail that ties everything together. In February of 2024, Frommers published an investigation into Disney's Lightning Lane system. The finding was simple and damning. Lightning Lane gives Disney a financial incentive to post longer wait times. When standby lines grow, more guests panic and buy Lightning Lane access. When more guests buy Lightning Lane, the merge point ratio shifts, and standby lines grow even longer. The cure causes the disease. Disney created the congestion, then sold the solution, and the worse the congestion gets, the more money the solution generates. In late 2023, a visitor posted continuous footage from a merge point at Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. The camera recorded roughly 100 Lightning Lane guests being waved through before 15 standby guests were allowed to move. That is the yield management strategy in motion, not on a spreadsheet. On camera, in the park, in front of families who paid full admission and were standing in the line Disney had financially incentivized to make longer. A mother standing in that line with 2 kids does not see yield management. She sees a park that used to treat her family the same as everyone else. It is the mechanism underneath the mechanism. The parks do not just charge more for less. They are engineered to make the free experience worse so the paid experience feels necessary. $10 billion in operating income. Attendance down. The free services eliminated. The architecture redesigned around bars and retail. The wait times financially incentivized to grow. The CFO describing the target customer as higher income deciles on camera. Disney World is not broken. Disney World is performing exactly as designed. The families who saved up drove down to Florida and walked through those gates believing nothing else mattered for a few days. They were not the target customer anymore. The target customer spends more, visits less often, and never notices what is missing because they never knew what used to be there. The annual pass holder who came 50 times a year, who knew the cast members by name, who posted the photos that marketed the parks for free, that customer was worth less per visit on a spreadsheet. Disney replaced recurring emotional attachment with one-time yield extraction. Disney's quarterly earnings reports say that was the right decision. Earnings reports at Sears said the same thing. So did the filings at Toys R Us. Right up until the quarter, they stopped being right. The parks still light up at night. The fireworks still go off on schedule. The marketing still calls it the most magical place on earth. But the version of Disney World that 30 million families believed in does not exist inside those gates anymore. It exists in the filing. $10 billion. That is where it went. The families who stopped going. Where did they end up?